What's up? It's Keefy, your boy, back with another War Stories, episode 2. You may see me fidgeting around during this one. I'm testing out some camera equipment behind my phone, so I could do an IG Live and then turn this into either a podcast or a vlog over at Ghost Cult on YouTube. IGTV is another possibility, but then there's a lot of heavy editing because you can have to break up the segments. But here at the GCHQ, got a little light on in the room since we're doing some video. And I'm going to wait for some people to join, a few more people, and then we're going to kick it off. But this is War Stories, not about wars. There's plenty of bands that do that already. Sabaton. Wolfheart's brand new album is all about an incredible war between Finland and Russia, the Winter War, out tomorrow, April the 10th, in this time of Corona. And, you know, I wanted to, you know, give a sense of what this pod and what this visuals are all about, really. You know, just trying to get the flavor of everything. Just make sure I have this setting correctly. Sorry. Now the light is reflecting on my face. That's better. Trying to get it right. We'll take the glasses off. Maybe that's better. I don't know. We shall see. But yeah, appreciate you guys spending some time with me. Very thankful for the opportunity to share some of my stories. I don't know that I'm the most interesting person ever, but I certainly have a lot of stories to tell. By my own estimation, hey, what's up? I have probably attended 6,000 concerts in my entire life since I'm a little boy to now. And that includes going to shows as a little kid with my mom or my, parents. Concerts I went to as a teenager, which we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. Shows that I went to, shows that I played with bands. I played over 1,300 shows, mostly concentrated in about like 6 or 7 years with 2 different bands. And also a lot of orchestra and theater and things like that. So it's not just being in a band. It wasn't in a couple of years. It was like over a stretch of time. I played music in bands for a long time, mostly from the time I was 15 until I was mid to late 30s. And I'm kind of retired from playing music. But if you saw one of my lives with Curtis Stewart recently, you saw me break out my acoustic and play terribly. Play some terrible covers, Anthrax, Pink Floyd, whatever. Unlike the other IG sessions you've seen me do here, I'm not doing a Q&A tonight, so I see you all. I'm not acknowledging you. It's bad English. I'm tired. But I'm trying to see if this format works for other channels. And this particular format is just a me, camera, story. So again, this is War Stories with Keefy. Not about wars. I'm pretty anti-war unless you get attacked and you need to defend yourself. Sorry. Bit of a snowflake here. And, but the wars usually involve some kind of conflict at a show or some kind of anxiety. I've been an anxious person my whole life. Music definitely helps with the anxiety and depression that I have felt and faced. So yeah, I think enough people are here. I'm probably going to get started in 1 more minute. Like I said, there's no actual linear timeline. I'm just picking out memorable stories from my life and sharing them. This is partially inspired by the brand new podcast Music Exists with Chuck Klosterman, who's a bit of a hero of mine, and I forget his co-host now. Chris, who's the editor at TheRigger.com. I'm also a big fan of and am highly recommending the St. Vitus Presents Age of Quarantine podcast, hosted by either Chris Enriquez of Spotlights or David Castillo of St. Vitus Bar and Primitive Weapons Confines. Those guys are doing a bang-up job. Semi-inspired this, like I saw what they were doing. I'm not doing the same thing. I just felt compelled to tell a little bit more of my stories. I think anybody that follows Ghost Cult, that sees my interviews, that reads my reviews, is always a little bit of personal history peppered in there. That's just my style. I don't really choose to separate the things and experiences that I've had from the music I'm hearing now or in the past. I think that's just part of my human experience. I'm not saying everybody should do it that way. Actually, you shouldn't, but I do, and I am. So yeah, I will get started. And again, I see you all, and I appreciate you all being here. I'm not going to do my usual what's up and take questions, unless it becomes that kind of thing at the end. But episode 2 of War Stories with Keefy is about my first hardcore show. Just to give you a little context, I am from New York City, and obviously I grew up in a time sort of overlapping with New York hardcore. I was never really a true hardcore kid. I had a lot of friends in the hardcore scene who I hung around with and followed them around, but I was definitely a young rocker, a young metalhead in the 80s. I liked other stuff too, pop music and jazz and classical that I got from my parents. I had 2 brothers. One has passed on. The other one, we don't have a relationship, but he was a musician. So I got a lot of band stuff from him, classic rock, progressive rock, a little bit of jazz, fusion. He also liked some bands that I thought were horrible. The Grateful Dead, horrible. Just horrible. Fish, horrible. Anybody like that, horrible. I'm not saying they can't play. Trey Anastasio is a great guitarist. Jerry Bear was a great guitarist. Phil Lesh is a great bassist. Pigpen was a great keyboard player. They're great members of those bands. I just don't find that music interesting to me at all. I think it's music for dead people. Literally. Boomers and dead people. But I'm also like an okay boomer to younger people, so whatever. But yeah, I came up in New York City, and other things seeped in, pop music, hip-hop, whatever. You have to, acquire what's around you. But by the early to mid-'80s, I was definitely a heavy metaler. I got into thrash metal right before Master of Puppets came out. I loved a lot of punk, but a lot of the punk that I liked, it turned out I didn't know. I thought it was this cutting edge music. It was actually went from like avant-garde and punk rock right to classic rock, which is Ramones, Blondie, to a lesser extent, some of those bands. Scott Lee is here. What's up? But, I kind of skipped over. I was like I was aware of New York hardcore, and I loved a lot of those bands as early as I could. And, but I just was kind of on the periphery of that scene. I never claimed to be a hardcore kid, but I loved hardcore, and I loved the energy and the rebellion, because I was a very political little kid. My parents were very heavy into local politics in the Bronx, and you had that like fight the power spirit, and I thought punk rock was very rebellious and had a fight the power spirit, just like early hip hop. Again, I was a little bit of an anomaly living in the ghetto and in the Bronx. I'm a projects kid, but definitely, I think I mentioned this on a recent podcast, where there was a period of time where people went from fighting with fists and like guns and knives to like breakdancing and rapping. Clearly my rocker friends didn't breakdance and rap as much, but we were, enjoyed the stuff and was incorporated in our daily lives. But as I got into junior high school, which was horrible for me, I was horribly bullied every day of junior high school for 3 years. And I escaped to the amazing LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts. Some of my classmates were Marlon Wayans and Omar Epps. Other famous alumni are Yo-Yo Ma, Jessie Norman, the famous soprano, Jessica Pimentel, who we ran our podcast with her on the Dumb and Dumbest podcast today. So, you know, I went to that high school, and in high school is sort of, so 86, 87, I know it's already kind of the second wave, really, of New York hardcore, but that's when I really became aware of the bands and the players and the people, and I fell in with a crowd. I auditioned for a couple of punk bands because I just wanted to be in a band, and some of my, you know, I just didn't have the opportunity to be in another kind of band. I wanted to play thrash, really, or progressive rock and thrash somehow. I didn't know what Voivod was yet till another year later, but I wasn't truly a punk, but I hung with punk people. They welcomed me in, even though I had like a denim jacket and a Pink Floyd patch on one arm and a And Justice for All Doris patch on the other, and I wore like a Metallica or Slayer shirt every day of high school practically, except for occasionally Yankees, Knicks, Giants. I like I said, I auditioned for a couple of punk bands that were friends' bands, a ska band. I was like blown away by them, and I just couldn't hang. I wasn't what they were looking for as a vocalist. I didn't really get good on bass till a while later, and playing bands on bass until really my late teens and 20s, although I was playing bass for a while then. And friends of mine were like, oh, you know, oh, dude, there are these all-ages shows at CBGB's. I had obviously heard of CBGB's, having grown up in New York, and always wanted to go there. And it was like, dude, you have to come, you have to come. And I was like, all right, cool, we'll go. I'll go to a show, whatever. I wanted to, you know, make new friends and change my life from this very bullied kid. Of course, you get into the, you know, you're like the insecure kid in the street tough junior high school, and then you go to the performing arts high school where everybody else is also really insecure and, you know, badly injured and doesn't want to do their art anymore because now it's a chore. So those kids also bully each other unfucking believably. There's a lot of mixed feelings about my high school years, but overall it was good. I definitely would have been dead if I went to my local 2 high schools. I would have been murdered or did myself in. But so I get there, I'm hanging out with some friends. I had tried out for their band unsuccessfully, but I was still kind of hanging around. I would like hang out at rehearsals, watch them play, you know, take mental notes, like this is what I'm going to do when I have a band. And, you know, this is how I'm going to do things when it's my turn to play in bands. I always had a big personality. I was a musical theater kid. I kind of had 2 lives. I had this kind of depressed, impoverished ghetto life, or 3 lives. I had this impoverished ghetto life. I had like junior high school where I was just fucking pounded into submission every day like a bitch. And it was hard, you know, just demoralizing at every turn. Even when cool things would happen. I met lifelong friends in junior high school. One of my best friends in the world. We're still friends today. We met in the playground in 1985. And we're still friends, Curtis Dunlop. And, you know, but I went to this, I was hanging around with my friends, and we went to CB's on a Sunday to see Mucky Pup and Burn. And for those that don't know, you're probably more familiar with their later era bands. Mucky Pup went on to become Dog Eat Dog in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, and then Burn sort of, those guys all split and went to other bands, and the frontman Shaka Malik formed Orange 9mm, excuse me, which I loved. I loved both of those. I loved all 4 of those bands, actually. I thought Mucky Pup was like a more juvenile, less thrashy version of S.O.D, very funny, kind of overreaching a little bit sometimes, but like they also had like a sense of humor that was great, and I liked funny. Funny is always good with me. Progressive rock, Monty Python, Weird Al, S.O.D, Mucky Pup. You couldn't get away with making some of these Mucky Pup or S.O.D records today. And Burn. And again, Burn was just this like weird, sort of very interesting precursor to a lot of, were hardcore, but they could also do jazz. Malik also could rap and Shaka could do rap and spoken word. Really incredible stuff. And I was listening to tapes of my friends, especially of Burn, and I was like, oh man, I need to go see this band. I have to go. I think it was $6. I was my first time in an adult bar by myself. I had gone to like events and clubs and jazz clubs with my mom, so I was accustomed to kind of like putting on a little dressy shirt and pants and going to the jazz club. But this was different. This was like, you know, out on my own at the famous club in New York City, the most famous club in all of the world, maybe at that time. And my friends, because I rep metal every day, and I didn't cut my hair at one point for like 10, 12 years, so I had long fucking hair, and always a metal shirt on, and I show up. I met them. I didn't know where it was. Like, you didn't have the internet back then. You just had to kind of like look at the train map and figure it out. But we met by the Cube, which is still somehow there, Astor Place. So I took the 2 train. I think I changed at 42nd. I took the shuttle over. I was already going to high school in Manhattan, so I was accustomed to taking the train places. We met at the Cube and walked down to S.O.B.s from there. And I got up from the train, and I'm pretty sure I was wearing like my black Levi's jacket with a couple of patches on it, but not much, and definitely a Yankees hat, because that's what my usual thing was every day, and definitely like my gross And Justice for All shirt. And my friends took one look at me, and they were all like flight jackets and Docs, and a couple had a crew cuts and like very plain white tee, Hanes white tees, and I looked like a sloppy metalhead. And they were like, dude, you cannot go into CBGB's looking like a metalhead. You will get fucked up. I was like, we could get fucked up today? I don't want to get fucked up. I'm used to getting beat up all the time by my block, at school, my house, by my dad. It's like, I don't want to get fucked up. I think my dad had passed away by this point. Or just, had he just passed? I think he had maybe just passed away a few months prior. So, but I was like, I don't want to get beat up. So they're like, listen, I had a hoodie. It was like early spring. So it was cold. And I had a hoodie under my denim. And I kind of was always chubby, so I always had like a little room in the jacket. So it's like, zip up your hoodie, put your hood on, tie your hair back, zip this fucking hoodie up. Do not let anyone see your long hair or your Metallica shirt. You will get fucking punched the fuck out. I was like, all right, I'm tired of getting punched the fuck out already. I had been taking some karate classes for a few years. I finally like started sticking up for myself. My dad was like a very brutal guy, and he was unhappy that I couldn't fight back. So I finally started I took some karate lessons and started fighting back, or at least defending myself. Block your face, you dumb fuck. So I definitely didn't want to get fucked up by some people at this thing. So go in the club. It's like, you know, kind of a mix of, it's a matinee, so it's mostly kids, but there was a couple of adults there. Probably some of the players you know now to be legendary and famous people were there, because frankly, you know, Mucky Pup was kind of a Jersey band, but Burn was a huge band in New York City. Huge band from the boroughs at that time, like the hot band. This is before their debut album, the sort of debut EP, self-titled, which I still rep that record. I posted a gram earlier on the Ghost Called Keefy account of Drowned. And Mucky Pup, again, was funny, and I like funny. So we go in, I'm all wide-eyed. It looks like a fucking dilapidated, bombed out place, but actually you don't realize till you've been in other places that S.O.B.s is amazing. But it was like, this is incredible and terrible at the same time. It was fucking too dark. I was like, anything could happen. This is fucking dangerous. And I'm, you know, I had kind of, like I said, a little rough and tumble childhood. I wasn't bad, but we did dumb shit. Ran around on rooftops in the projects, shot fireworks off the roof. I got busted by the cops. We used to, I live right near the Bronx Botanical Gardens and the Bronx Zoo, and we used to sneak in. We used to like run across the highway that separated our housing projects and the Bronx Botanical Gardens, and the zoo was on the other side. We literally play like Frogger, human Frogger, or Cubert, and run across this highway while cars zip by, no lights, you could get killed easily. And then go under this fence at the Botanical Gardens, which had like a tunnel with water and rats or whatever. And then we would run around the Botanical Gardens all night and play this game called Manhunt, which was basically tag in the dark. We never got caught. We did not break into the zoo because I was like, we're going to get fucking eaten by an animal. Fuck that. But, you know, I figured the trees and flowers ain't going to hurt me. So that was that. Occasionally you would see some raccoons, and I never saw opossums, but I guess they live in upstate New York, Westchester, whatever. But, yeah, you know, so we go into the club, and it's filling up with kids, and it's like 1 o'clock on a Sunday in the spring, and I'm fucking scared. I'm sweaty, but I'm scared. I don't want to unzip my hoodie or take my hair out. I'm dying of heat. Like, you know, I look very thick, reddish brown hair. It was like all in my back, my neck hiding. One of the guys was like, tuck it under your t-shirt. I was like, no. He said, because if anybody sees inside your hoodie, they're going to see that you know, have hair. And I was like, I pulled that shit. There was no South Park back then, but I did a Kenny. I pulled the hoodie very tight to my face and tied it up in a little bow. And, yeah, man, the show started and there was some openers I really don't remember. I don't think they were very notable, but I love, like, suddenly I saw moshing for the first time in person. I saw slam dancing. You know, it wasn't really quite like heavy metal. Karate or push-pull was like a lot of just pushing and punching and running around and running into people and shoulder clipping people like it was football. And I was just kind of like back to the wall, scared but exhilarated. It was really amazing. And like I said, Burn was opening for Mucky Pup because Mucky Pup had been already Burn was the hot band locally, but Mucky Pup was kind of rising up a little already. I think they had a record deal. Their first record, you know, was already like on the way up. I think both bands had like some demos. So Burn came on and just fucking blew my mind, man. It was just like energy and the crowd piling on for the mic and a lot of contact. And, you know, metal, certainly my childhood progressive rock, I still loved all that stuff. But, you know, very pretentious. And I was kind of an artsy-fartsy kid anyway, progressive rock and theater. My mom was a dance teacher and a choreographer. So he's kind of like a little artsy-fartsy. And, you know, it was like, you know, visceral. Like you felt the energy in the room and you felt everybody giving it back and forth. It was really incredible. And, yeah, Burn was unbelievable. And like I said, they could do hardcore. They could do like a little bit of hip hop and jazz. They did spoken word. It was very protesty and very straight up, you know, New York hardcore lyrics and unity and common bonds and self-reliance and being true and having a code. And it was all these things that I was like, this is what's kind of missing a little bit from metal. You know, and as much as I love my thrash metal at that time, this is like 4 years into the time when I was aware of and became a huge thrash fan. But like thrash didn't have a lot of this. There was a lot of like devils and demons and fucking wizards and, you know, craziness. Like, but I love that. I love, you know, there's things about metal that punk borrowed and there's things about punk that metal borrowed. Interestingly enough, I played with a kid in a band, in two bands over like a long period of time, maybe like 7-8 years. And he used to ask me if I thought like metal guys listened to like old school rap because a lot of the hip hoppy boom bap beats that are in metal, especially like 90s groove metal, were borrowed from hardcore, which borrowed from rap. Especially Cro-Mags and bands like that. But Burn blew my fucking mind. People were I saw crowd surfing in person for the first time, moshing for the first time in person. I saw somebody get knocked down, get picked back up. I was like, that's fucking amazing. I immediately felt like, oh, this is actually my people. I never had the credibility to just be a punk, but like I felt in that moment, that kinship that I still feel to this day. There's a honesty in good punk rock music that even, you know, pop punk, melodic punk, hard, you know, whatever. There's an honesty and sincere punk that still exists that I saw that day in person. And, you know, Mucky Pup comes on by comparison and it's like literally, you know, Chaucer hanging out with Bukowski. You know, like Burn was so eloquent and thoughtful and earnest and powerful and, you know, just angry. And then Mucky Pup is angry too, but for other different reasons. Clearly not getting enough love, not enough drugs, not enough titties in their life, not enough sex, not enough social interactions, but hilariously funny, a lot of fun, also a lot of energy. They had a surprising ear for melody. Again, they definitely wanted to be S.O.D, which I really wasn't quite aware of just yet, just barely aware of them. I knew, obviously I loved Anthrax, partially from my hometown of the Bronx, New York. Charlie and Frankie are from the Bronx, not my neighborhood, but near enough. So I was aware of S.O.D, but, not quite. They weren't, it wasn't that huge yet as a thing. I just knew about them. And you could tell later on that Mucky Pup borrowed a lot of stuff from S.O.D, or, like the humor, and M.O.D, the humor. And again, like I said, I went to quite a few shows. Wetlands Preserve had a bunch of all ages shows. S.O.B.s, Bond Street Cafe. All these places are obviously gone. Probably forgetting there's another one on Houston and Varick, but it's not S.O.B.s. It was another one, which is down by Hudson. I'll have to remember it. I'm going to have to jog I'm getting old now. It's just like 35 years ago, like over 30 years ago. At least 32, 33 years ago now. But, yeah, man, Mucky Pup was fun. Burn was inspiring. I walked out of there like a new person. Like I had some of my DNA rearranged. Like the first time I heard certain bands, it was the same thing. Like, wow, I belong in this. Even if, it's like, I don't know if they're ever going to accept me. And then like a year later, without fail, I was seeing S.O.D and Exodus at the Ritz, which I definitely was not old enough to get into. And at that point, I was like 16, and I started to 16 on the cusp of 17. I looked a little older for my age, not really facial hair, but I had enough hair. I had hair for a little bit. I didn't cut it till senior year. My mom was like, there's going to be senior pictures. You have to cut your hair. And I was like, I kind of caved in at that point. And then I didn't cut my hair at that point until like 8 or 9 years later after that, like 8 years later. But, I still had long hair, and I used to just kind of put my hair in my face, and they'd be like, you got ID? And I was like, no. And it's like, you can't drink. X on the hand. Just don't drink. I was like, I don't even want to fucking drink. I just want to be here for the show. So I got into the Ritz, which is now Webster Hall. And a year later, punks and metalheads were buddies, and there was no fucking beef. But definitely that first couple of shows I went to was absolutely fucking terrifying. Just like shitting my pants, terrifying. Did you bring your shitting pants? I did. I brought my shitting pants. I did not want to get punched the fuck out. I did not want to get beat up. I already had enough violence and beatings in my life at that point. And even though I could defend myself a little bit at that point, I was like, these guys are my friends from high school. I didn't know them as long as some of my other friends at that point. I was like, I don't know if these guys are going to actually get my back. I hope so. They seem nice, but like, I don't know if they're going to have my back. I hope. So the first couple of, first maybe 3 or 4 shows that I went to that were like punk shows or matinees, I was definitely scared as shit. And then like a year and a half later, everybody was fucking, S.O.D became big, and Exodus kind of felt like a punk band even though they were thrash, and I started going to more shows, and there was always a matinee to go to, or a show in somebody's house, or a show to meet. We used to put on shows at recording studios. We'd like rent the studio and then just kind of walk in all our friends and put on a show for like 20 people and get, yelled at and probably kicked out. We'll just throw them a little more extra. Here, we'll pay for an extra hour. Just like, nobody's fucking around. We're just all watching. They're just watching us play. We're preparing for a big gig, and we wanted to bring our friends in. I don't know, whatever bullshit story we made up. But, yeah, so, yeah, man, CBGB's, the good old days in New York City, the real Lower East Side, when it was, like, not gentrified, it was dangerous, there was drugs, there was, like, racy people, there was, like, it was insane. There was an energy that crackled when you walked down the street. It was fucking interesting. Every store was different. Every store was a mom and pop store. There was almost no fast food joints. There was like bodegas and one diner that everybody knows, and everything else was a mom and pop store or like a school or a church or something, whatever. There's a couple down there, temples, churches, mosques. But I definitely got into like the classic A7. I got in there. I started to go to that place like with my hair in my face. I had a teenage kid. I was like in my early 20s, and I had a teenage kid playing lead guitar in my first serious metal band, and he also had crazy long hair, and he had like a little facial hair, and he looked kind of chunky and older, and we would just walk in, no one would card us, we'd order a pitcher of beers, he'd be sitting there drinking, kind of looked like Slash without the top hat. We were all there in our, leathers or denims, no leather for me, mostly denim. A lot of stonewashed jackets in the 90s, bad decisions, borderline mullets when I cut my hair to like my shoulders. After high school, so I like grew to like my shoulders and didn't grow any longer for a while until later. So some unfortunate photos, but yeah, man, the grit and the realness of New York City back in the day kind of added something to my life. I already had a lot of grit and personal bullshit, but like this was inspiring stuff. It was scary, but it was like educational kind of in a way. It was like, oh, this is like the real. This is like what grown-ups in music do. This is what you do. You go to the matinee show, and if somebody falls down, you pick them up, and you know all the words, and you support the bands and buy their hand-drawn cassettes and handmade shirts, and talk to the bands came off the stage, and it was not like all the jazz shows I had seen as a little boy or the few rock and metal shows I'd seen as a teen. There was this space between the band and the audience, and the hardcore. This is the other thing that I really carried with me into my band days, and even to now, is I like the intimacy of hardcore. I like the intimacy, the up close and personal of a little club, as much as I love huge venues. Funny enough, that I do a lot of concert photography now, I kind of prefer the bigger venue as a shooter because I know there's a barricade, so I'm getting too old to get like moshed around. The last show that I went to before this stupid plague was Soulfly and Toxic Holocaust, and I was definitely like pinned to the corner of the wall in St. Vitus right next to the stage the whole night shooting. And I like that same funny bone from 1987, 1988 was tickled inside of me that night. Even like, you don't get to see Max Cavalera right into the audience, like led through the crowd onto the stage and led off the stage and through the crowd again, where you could touch him and high-five him. He was high-fiving everybody. He saw me. I've interviewed him a few times, including a few months ago, so he was like, acknowledge me. I was like, oh, dude. I saw Gloria, gave her a big hug. Joel, I had interviewed, that's up on YouTube now, and he just was like right next to me and gave me a couple of like guitar actions into the camera, whatever. But I like that intimacy. Didn't really exist in jazz. Jazz guys are very serious and focused on the moment and the movements. And obviously classical, I had a big classical music background too. And like, there's no interaction with the crowd. It's just very serious. Sight read off the page, which I'm terrible at sight reading. And, there was a thing about punk, that this punk energy and this punk intimacy and this punk realness that really made me a lifelong fan and respecter. And again, I have other stories that I'll get into in further episodes of this, wherever this winds up, a podcast, my YouTube here. I don't know yet, but there's definitely some other instances later that my earlier experience colored in for me, and just built bonds and appreciation and respect and, friends for life, which is kind of unbelievable that people that I used to go watch at like a matinee see me now and they're like, yo, what's up, Keefy? And I'm like, still kind of bugged out a little bit that they know me. And I'm not special. I work really hard and people know me from this thing, but like, I'm just another guy, I'm just another local kid in the street getting paid for my vocal once in a while. Not that much anymore. But, so yeah, man, that's, like you can learn things. You got to step outside of your comfort zone to like really grow as a person. I definitely was going through a lot of growth as a teenager, a lot of, good times and terrible times. But this was some really great shit. This really was very, like, I can't express how inspirational it was to like go to these all ages shows. Go to a place, like there are places that don't exist anymore, like all of St. Mark's Place. For those of you who know, New York City is transformed. It's mostly gone from what it was. 2nd Avenue, Lower East Side Avenues. My parents are from down there, but I grew up in the Bronx. They had moved away. I only heard stories about the old neighborhood, but like it was like almost a museum in real time. Preserved, like it was happening, like real history was happening in the streets. whether it was, you know, people in disrepair falling over in Tompkins Square Park, or squatters and punks and bands forming, bands that would shape a generation. I'm going to definitely spend a couple episodes talking about those bands. I might have to do like one episode each per band, because that shit just shaped and changed me, those experiences and that music. But yeah, man, it's just like you step outside of your comfort zone and you learn and you grow, and you get to make yourself open to accept these things, because there's a lot of people who just kind of like the first thing they love is all they know, and then they don't learn anything else ever. And that's kind of sad. I'm glad that I kind of like jumped around. Anyway, to be a music editor, to be a music journalist, you kind of have to be a little bit of a, you know, genre agnostic. You have to be a little of a generalist and not an elitist. Definitely, we all have our elitist moments, you know, Ozzy, Dio, but like you know, Harley, John Joseph. But hey, 2 Christmases, 2 Cro-Mags. It's cool. I'm cool. I actually enjoy the Harley EP right now, and I'm looking forward to new music from the Cro-Mags JM with John, Bloodclot, and Mackie. But yeah, man, that's my story. Again, just to recap, you know, you don't have to belong to a scene to really respect and appreciate and love it. And I think that I've gotten very lucky to come up close and personal with some real punk legends and talk to them about like their experiences, and just kind of, because of my awareness of it, because I kind of was there, but I wasn't so entrenched. I still have kind of an objectivity and not rose-colored glasses. There's definitely some terrible shit. I've seen some terrible shit. But this particular first show ever, Bird and Mucky Pup, man, was just fucking magical, man. It was magical. It was a magical time. Burn, you know, reunited, and they had an EP out and a full length out a couple of years ago on Death Wish. I highly recommend those records. I know that Mucky Pup also put out like a record maybe 10, 12 years ago. Doggy Dog still tours. For those who like, you know, Who's the King and stuff like that, like mid-90s Roadrunner records. You know, at the same time of like Life of Agony and Typo Negative, there was also Doggy Dog. And locally, Doggy Dog had mad respect because they were basically, everybody knew they were Mucky Pup at one point. So, most of them. So, and a lot of those guys are now doing different bands too. So I highly recommend you go. Maybe I'll have to make a playlist, or maybe I'll make a reading list, or maybe I'll make a album required listening after these episodes. It's going to be all over the fucking map, though. Like I said, the first one, you know, was Woodstock 99, which is a weird place to start, but I'm not really doing this in a linear life story kind of way, because that's boring. I'm not that interesting, but I just wanted to share some of these stories with y'all, and let me know what you think. Comment when I share this video. Message me, DM me here at Ghost Cult Mag, DM me at Ghost Cult Keefy. You know, if we're friends on Facebook, let me know what you thought about this. I'm trying this out. I'm going to see what works. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you, guys. I'll peace out here. Thanks.